Welcome to the Prophetic Archive Recognition Exalts Me, Part 3. And we want to start by giving thanks to God the Father for allowing us to be connected here. We thank Him because it is a privilege to know that we are His children, to know that He sent His Spirit to dwell in us. Today we feel joyful, even if things don't go the way we want. Even if we don't have what we need, because one thing we know is that the Holy Spirit of God has not left us. There might be many things you have not yet achieved or obtained, but one very important thing is that even if creation is not fully present in your life, you still have the creator of all things. And when you have the creator of all things, you have everything because you know that in him there is no mistake. If there's something that you don't have, it's not because he doesn't want to give it to you. If there's something that you don't have, it's because the time hasn't come yet, whether you allowed it to be taken from you or the season for it has not yet arrived. That's why, no matter our circumstances, whether we have or don't, we rejoice in the Father. Let's read on the book of Ephesians 5. First, it says, "Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But among you, there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be any obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather there should be thanksgiving. For of this you can be sure: no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things, God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. For the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient does in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. That's why it is said, 'Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.' Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit." And the last two verses say, "Speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, and always giving thanks to the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." In recognition lies the exaltation of men. One of the greatest dilemmas every human being faces is that we want to be recognized, but we don't want to recognize others. How many of you want to be recognized? We all do. We all like to be recognized, but we don't like to recognize others. That's the truth. You might be able to identify certain things, but ignorance often leads you not to recognize them, even the simplest things that are part of your exaltation. Human exaltation comes through recognition. But you might say, "But Pastor, I know many people who have been exalted in many things, and I don't see them recognizing." Well, I must tell you, remember, there are many people who have reached the heights of glory and fame under the influence of the enemy through pacts and connections with Satan. Satan also recognizes, he also exalts. But the great struggle of every human being is that everyone wants to be recognized in the same way as those in the world, through fame and wealth. But have you asked yourself how that person, how that famous person reached fame and wealth? Have you asked yourself if it was done through principles or by doing anything to get there? I know you want to be like Dr. So and so, or this singer, or this influencer, or this philosopher, or ball player, but you don't ask how they reached that exaltation. Hello? You just want to be like them, right? As a teenager, everybody wanted to be like Michael Jordan, yes or no? How do you want it to be like? Who do you want to imitate? Sad thing is that you want to be recognized, and that is part of our nature, to be recognized. But I want you to understand is that within our nature, there is that desire to be recognized at any cost. And that doesn't come from God. We are very inclined to seek recognition, but we are not inclined to recognize others. But Pastor, what does it mean to recognize? I'm glad you asked. It means to remember or identify something or someone. It is to admit. When a person remembers or identifies something or someone, they are recognizing. When humanity sinned, it lost the ability to recognize. From the moment man sinned, he automatically lost all sensitivity, all sensors, and no longer had perception of things. When Adam sinned and God was calling him, he couldn't even hear. It is part of our human nature not to recognize. And when we lose the sensitivity and the perception of things, you don't even know how to recognize authority. I often would call my daughter Diana 1,000 times, Diana, Diana, and Diana. And she would only listen to the 1,000th time I called her. You know why? Because it's not the same for her to hear Diana from her dad than to hear Diana from her authority. Hello? When Adam sinned and the Lord called him, Adam couldn't recognize God's voice, as if others were there with him in the garden. And think about it, there was only 3 people, God, Eve, and Adam. And Adam didn't hear. He probably thought it was a cow or a horse calling him. He didn't even recognize God's voice. And today, by nature, we do the same. We don't recognize God's voice. The greatest spiritual battle is that by nature, you don't hear, you don't understand, you don't discern, you have dead sensors. You're only driven to do everything that is carnal, and that's the reality of it all. Your desires and everything that pulls you in that direction don't make you do God's will, but your own. And doing your own is very disconnected from what God really wants from you. Adam didn't recognize God's voice because in sin, man automatically loses the ability to recognize authority, to identify, to admit, to have the sensory perception to identify God. He no longer hears him or feels him. Man was and is completely disconnected from spiritual life. Man walks in a carnal human life because he became disconnected. Even today, even though you have Christ Jesus, you must sit down every day and learn again to know how to begin activating those dead sensors in your life. Many people have dead sensors. They don't understand, not even through fasting, prayer, or guidance, even when it's clearly indicated to them. How many have gone through that? All of us. I have gone through that season in my life. All of us have. The greatest struggle for every human being is to learn how to identify, recognize, know, and admit, because in recognition lies exaltation. The Holy Spirit that dwells in us will not be able to exalt you if you don't apply recognition to what dwells within you. You must connect things properly. You must understand that recognizing is what connects you to who you truly are. Humanly speaking, you spend your life recognizing everything except what really matters, which is where there lies the exaltation. And that's why you had little exaltation. Because by simply recognizing what didn't concern you, there was already rebellion in your life. You wanted to recognize how you want it, when you want it, how you felt like it, and not when you had to do it. How do you do things today? As you please, as you wish, as you want. But is your life yours? Is your life for you to decide how you want to run it, who to talk to, and when? Your life is not for you to do as you please. Man lost his life in Eden and gave it to the devil. Thank God for life, because even though we gave our life to Satan, God still left a stage where man could have a second chance. Today, as you're listening to this, if you decide you will use that opportunity, for good or not, it's up to you to decide. Today, if you will use this chance to do things according to the kingdom, it's for your own benefit, but if not, it's for your own disgrace. Recognition exalts me. And today we're talking about Ephesians 5, where we were reading on the characteristics of recognition. The introduction to this text in Ephesians 5:1 says, "Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children." For you to be able to recognize, you must understand the characteristics of recognizing. And what are those characteristics? Number one, Ephesians 5:1 and 2 says that here you will be able to see if recognition is operating in you. You must learn to handle recognition because that's part of the life of a child. Children of God are the only ones who recognize. If you don't recognize, then you're not a children. You're not a child. You're a bastard. God says his children must imitate him. I'm going to ask you a question. Did Christ come to recognize or to be recognized? Did he came to serve or to be served? So the children must know how to describe the characteristics of recognition, because when I recognize, I am exalted. All exaltation will come through the recognition that you give. If you don't recognize, then you don't connect. When you hear how to handle this, when you hear these keys, you're going to say, wow, that's the difference between the natural world and the spiritual world. By nature, you were lost, but now there are rules and there are protocols that tells you how to do each thing, because nothing is done lightly. Verse number 2 of Ephesians 5 says, "And walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." Christ walked in love. Nothing you do without love will amount to anything. Everything we do must be done in love. If you don't have love in what you do, you won't have the strength to face it. Why haven't you not learned to recognize? Because you haven't done with love, things with love, but according to your desires. The characteristics of recognizing is walking in love. No one will be able to recognize if they don't have love. Now let's see what love is, according to the manual of life. 1 Corinthians 13:1-10 says, "If I speak in tongues of men and angels, but do not have love, I am only a surrounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy, which so many of us wanted a prophetic ministry, but don't have love, and I understand all the mysteries, which many of us wanted to handle all these mysteries, and have all the knowledge, which many of us wanted to, and if I have all faith to move mountains, but don't have love, I am nothing." Think about this, brothers and sisters. You know why you have to think about it? Because these humbles us. These humbles the superpower, the super prophet, the super scientific self, the super faith, the super mysterious folks we used to be in church. You know why? Because if to all of that we did, love was not added, it was nothing. Verse number 3 says, and if I give away all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not boast. It is not proud. It doesn't dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Well, Pastor, I didn't like that you said, Well, sister, love doesn't get easily angered. Then you don't have love. Verse number 6, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. You know why you don't recognize? Because you don't want to suffer. You don't recognize? Because you don't want to be kind. You know why we don't recognize? Because we don't want to show mercy. Everything that has been done seeking recognition was done, or we did it with the hope of being acknowledged. And if that recognition or that acknowledgement took too long, oh my God, we complain and complain and complain, and we stop recognizing because, Pastor, I keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and they don't appreciate it. They don't value me. It's not like that, sister. It says love keeps no record of wrongdoing. Well, Pastor, but you don't know what they did to me, what he did to me. Well, sister, tell me what they did to you, and I'm going to tell them what you did to the Lord. And we're going to be even. Love does not associate with injustice. How many of us associated ourselves with someone else's injustice? Someone else is committing their sin, and we associate it quickly. Why? Because we didn't know how to handle principles. Love is the fundamental base for recognition. Write that down. Love is the fundamental base for recognition. You will learn to recognize if you don't learn to love, and if you don't do it from love. Many ask me, how is it that pastor is so dedicated all the time? No, I'm not dedicated. I'm not nice. What I have done is manage this principle of love. And through love, I have been able to suffer, endure, wait, believe all of people's rebellions and shortcomings. But is it love that gives the strength? It is love. Because without it, how will we be able to resist? Many of you get tired because there's no love. And there's no reason to feel tired. There's no way. Because where there is love, everything endures. Where there is love, one rejoices in the truth. Some people say that these truths here are too harsh. Pastor, you kill me. The truth was too strong. Pastor, slow down. People complain about the truth instead of rejoicing and learning and saying, wow, today I learned that I'm a liar, that I did things wrong, that I'm a manipulator. The one who has the courage to say the truth shows love. Rejoicing in the truth is love. Recognizing is love. And you as a child must learn to live in that authority. Authority is understanding, because many believe that when they recognize, others will bully them and humiliate them. But let them humiliate you. So what? That's the plan. But Pastor, if I acknowledge that so-and-so will tell me that I'm this and that I'm that and that I'm this and that I'm that, so what? Love always protects. Love always trusts. Love always hopes and perseveres. And that always is not the world always. It's not the worldly always. It is the God's always. Why? Because here we talk about the manual of life. So it is the manual of life that I should believe in, not the world. What do I have today? Nothing. And what am I happy about? Nothing. Today I might not have nothing, but I'm happy about what's coming, because I know I'm always expecting something from the Father. When I look at today, supposedly one is going through different stages in God, and you still see yourself with many financial limitations. But in spite of all those limitations, you see and you make an account of yourself and your life. God has still given us so much. And sometimes we don't even notice or appreciate it. How many have gone through that? When we look at ourselves, we know there's an expectation because we believe Him. We know that what He said shall come to pass. What He said will manifest. If you analyze and look at yourself from where you were in the past to how you are today, you will be surprised at how much you have changed for the better. And you will acknowledge that you have more than what you had in the past. Yes or no? When catastrophes come to the world, like earthquakes, tsunamis, you see those people suffering because they've lost everything, including the generations of families that vanish completely. And when you see that, you start saying, wow, God, thank you. I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed now because I have my mom and my dad. I have my pastors. I have brothers. And you realize how much you have in comparison to others who have nothing. But of course, unfortunately, all that awareness comes when disaster hits. People value what they have when they see disaster. You complain and complain, but when disaster strikes, you value and you value. Everyone who loses something today values what they've lost, no matter how small or how insignificant. And that's why here, after confronting yourself and going through a transition in your life, you realize that things needed to be valued. This time should be valued. But Pastor, this is too strong. Oh, Apostle, this is too strong. This apostolic confrontation and this prophetic archives and this tea. I wish your biggest struggle in life was listening to me, listening to these studies, listening to this prophetic content. I wish that will be your biggest disgrace. Why? Because love endures all things, because God speaks the truth. Let's continue. Love endures all things. What love? The love from the neighbor? The love from so and so? No, the love from the Father. And that love is activated in us in 3 ways. Number 1, kindness. When you become kind, which is part of the characteristics of love, you're activating the love of God in your life towards others and your surroundings. What is kindness? Is that constant force of love and mercy towards others. Matthew 25, 34 through 36 says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world.'" Verse 35, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." Every circumstance or situation in life is not a tragedy. It is for you to apply that wealth that God has placed in you. Everyone cries when something happens to them. If there's a need, they believe it was a tragedy that fell upon them. If they're in prison, they believe it's a tragedy. But on the contrary, tragedies are opportunities for you to establish God's love. The devil comes with tragedy, you come with love. God wants to establish, restore, and build up. But where there is no love, one cannot flow in the prophetic of God in your surroundings. People are waiting for God to do things, but He will do nothing because it is you who activates what is of God. You set the dynamo in motion to activate and produce. That's why when there are confrontations, in my inner self, in my instinct, I get intense because I see the response of others. And I see their reaction. They're like, Who has made the sound? That's rebellion manifesting. Don't you know that? And is rebellion manifesting? Is you giving a right to the enemy? How many times have you done that? That is you giving the enemy a right, because that's not kindness. That's not love. That's not recognizing. That's Don't give the devil the legal right to take what is yours, because the king will recognize those who recognize the needs of others, those who recognize people behaviors, not because they're like that, but because they are bound by the legalities and the lack of knowledge in their lives. Many who have unbelieving spouses or who don't have a connection with the kingdom must understand that they cannot have an angel beside them. And that when you assume the spiritual world, everything that is illegal around you will manifest. Yes or no? Now, because that happens, are you going to react with the sound? No. You must always establish the kindness of God. To every tragedy that approaches your life, establish love. The enemy comes and destroys everything with hatred and destruction, but you give him your best slap, and that is come with love. The kindness of God must be manifested in us. We want God's things to happen, but we don't want to activate them for things to manifest. I repeat, we want God's things to happen, but we don't want to activate them for things to manifest. I must activate them. And for them to be activated, I must establish the first foundation, which is love. And that is activated by the kindness of recognition. Kindness is that force of love where I recognize others, where I have mercy. Kindness in me must be produced as a lifestyle. How much love, how much mercy God had for me. I know it's not easy to find with your wife, for your husband, for your children on a constant basis, but love and kindness must be shown. You can get grouchy or grumpy, but go back and say, honey, I'm sorry, forgive me, I messed up. That's why we don't want to recognize, because to recognize, you need to have love. And to have love, you need to have kindness. And kindness is that constant force of love and mercy to others. I have to love my husband, my children, my family, no matter how stubborn they are. I put this practice first with my family. Walking in love is what will allow you to recognize. Walking in love is what will give you the energy, the strength to have mercy on the one who is waging war against you, or on that one that is not behaving as you want. Just because they're not behaving like you want doesn't mean you should stop showing love and mercy of God. Do you imagine that God does that to you or me? Number 2 of the characteristics of recognition, justice. These are the characteristics of recognition and why many times we didn't know how to recognize and we violated these principles. This is very connected to recognizing all these characteristics here imply. Justice is the legal principle of things. Isaiah 45:23 says, by myself I have sworn, from my mouth has gone out in righteousness a word that shall not be revoked. Everything I do and recognize is done under a legal principle. Sometimes we lose our composure because in seeking recognition, we lose principles. You know why? Because ultimately what we want is to win and to have the last say. We don't want to establish principles. We want to win. And there are moments when we will do anything to win. Some people, after showing some kindness and mercy for X amount of time, say, you know what, Pastor, I've had enough. It's over. How many have said that? But let me tell you that when you recognize, you're not doing it because somebody deserves it or it's worthy. It's because you're doing it under a legal principle. So, legally, when I recognize, I don't lose. But humanly, we don't recognize because we don't want to lose. That's the human concept. Why wouldn't you recognize? Because you don't want to lose. But when I recognize, I do so under justice. And justice is the legal principle of things. I'm not recognizing foolishness or wickedness or sin. I recognize principles. What is the principle? Evil is overcome with good. So that means your recognition comes under principle. It's not done recklessly or on your own decision, because almost always we recognize under some protest or by testing whether or not to do it or complaining. We say things like, oh, Pastor, I'll think about it. I'll see if I give him a chance or not. No. When we recognize, we do so under justice. And we say, instead of doing eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, we do it under the justice of overcoming evil with good. And if that's not established within you, you won't be able to recognize, because all the time, what will come out of you is eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And let me tell you something. To see God manifested in me, I had to learn to recognize in all areas of my life. I have had to give, surrender, lose. And anyone might say, well, that won't get me anywhere. Humans say that. For humans, managing principles seems like chaos, or they think you're a fool. They go to their human abilities and they're like, come on, Pastor. You know, I always have a car under my sleeve. I cannot just open up to so and so like that, you know. But us, when you're a child of God, when you're a son, when you're a daughter, you don't handle yourself that way. Everyone has been living under the world's coats, which only makes the enemy's marks in your life grow, because you no longer depend on yourself, but you depend on God. And depending on God is living under God's principles. When you don't depend on God and you depend on yourself, things will go south for you. So this is part of the characteristics of walking in love, which is also the characteristics of recognizing. Walking in love is walking in kindness, walking in justice, and number 3, walking in truth. Truth is everything I am under the biblical foundation. John 8:32 says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Where's the truth? In you. The manual of life came to bring out the truth that is in you. Again, where is the truth? In you. When I know the truth, then the truth sets me free. You will never be free if you don't know the truth that is in you. You behave like a fool because you don't know who you are. If you knew who you were, you wouldn't behave that way. If you do, it's because you don't know the truth of who you are. Walking in love is kindness. Walking in love is living in justice, applying the legal principle. Nothing I do is reckless. That is why this truth must be intrinsic within you, so that everything you operate and move is aligned with that direction. Kindness, justice, and truth. You don't recognize because since you don't know the truth, you're fighting the little you know about yourself. There are people who get uncomfortable when you tell them about the tragedy within them or their disgrace, and they say, no, Pastor. Don't take away my disgrace. Leave me like that. But if they were to embrace the advice or confrontation with love, they could finally realize or identify that that tragedy and that disgrace inside of them is stealing their own identity, which is the truth of God, of who you are as a child.